right, welcome back everyone to some more trivia. I know I've been doing a lot of these lately, but I've actually been recording most of them over the same couple of days as I pre-record a bunch of content before heading to Germany, which is now tomorrow for me. This time tomorrow I will be in Atlanta, Georgia, waiting to board my plane to fly to Munich. So we're going to take a look today at King Henry VIII, 20 trivia questions with answers. And we're actually going to spiral this one right into one about his daughter, Elizabeth I. So it's all going to be one video. It's basically Tudor trivia. It's only 5 minutes, 40 seconds long, so I'm definitely going to be pausing in between questions to add some history. This is just a unique way for us to talk about history. So we'll be using the trivia to see how good we can do, but also to talk about the real history behind these events. So I expect this will be a lot longer than 5.5 minutes. As always, the links in the description to the original content so you can check it out and see their other trivia without my commentary and without me shouting out the answers before you had a chance to. Let's go ahead and check this one out. This is an area I feel pretty confident in, so I better do well. Henry? That said Henry. All right, and so what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to answer right before the timer runs out. So I'm going to give you a chance to answer first. It's Henry VII, Henry Tudor. So Henry VII, we often refer to him as Henry Tudor before he won the crown by conquest at the Battle of Bosworth Field in August of 1485, defeating Richard III, who was killed in that battle. But Henry Tudor would not have called himself that. He didn't go by that name. He probably would have gone by the Earl of Richmond, that's the title that he's referred to. He's called Richmond in Shakespeare's plays before he becomes Henry VII. Tudor was his Welsh name. It was Ap Tudor was the name. It comes from a very lower class kind of. He's not like a member of nobility through the Tudor line. His line comes from his mother's side, where he's descended from the Beauforts and therefore descended from the kings of England and France. Oh, everybody should know this one if they know anything at all about Henry VIII. It's 6. Heck, there's a musical called 6 that we just saw. It was fantastic, by the way, if you're in the musical theater. People often say divorced, beheaded, and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. But technically, if we want to get really specific about it, it's disillusion rather than divorce, because a divorce would not have allowed Henry to remarry under the church as it existed in that time. So he gets a disillusion after 20 years of marriage to Catherine of Aragon, who was Spanish and had previously been married to his brother Arthur. Then he marries Anne Boleyn, who he also gets a disillusion from. Technically what they do is they declare the marriage null and void based on certain factors. She gets beheaded. Jane Seymour he marries. She dies of what was called childbed fever after giving birth to his son, the future King Edward VI. Then we have Anne of Cleves, who very quietly goes away when she's divorced by Henry. Disillusion again. Then you have Catherine Howard, who, again, divorced, but is executed. She definitely did cheat on her husband, unlike Anne Boleyn, who probably did not. And then Catherine Parr, who outlives Henry. So 2 for 2. Arthur. Yeah, I already said this. That's why I didn't wait on that one. Yeah, Henry was, and I love that they're playing Greensleeves in the background, which has been attributed to Henry VIII's authorship. Probably not so, but Arthur was the Prince of Wales. Henry was the second son. He was the spare, heir and a spare. Henry was the Duke of York. He was never intended to be the king. He actually thought about a life in the church even. Arthur dies after marrying Catherine of Aragon, who then becomes Henry's first wife. Okay, Henry's like 17 or 18 when he becomes king, and I think he becomes king in 1509. So I'm going to go with 1491 on this one. I was going to wait. I forgot. I think it's 1491. Already talked about this too. It's two, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, who were cousins, by the way. First cousins, I think. Both descended from the Dukes of Norfolk. Ooh, good one. This is the Field of the Cloth of Gold, where Henry and Francis very famously wrestled each other. The King of England wrestled the King of France, and Francis won, which did not sit well with Henry. You have to remember this, okay? All the images we have of Henry VIII as the fat, kind of out-of-shape guy, that's later in his life. Henry VIII, by all accounts, was a very charming guy, was a very athletic, very handsome guy. A lot of people talked about what fine calves he had. He was big into jousting, and it may be his love for jousting that led to his later years being very tyrannical and very unhealthy. He got injured in a jousting accident, and it's very soon after that he really began to kind of like behead a lot of people and turn on his wives and get unhealthy and deal with a lot of issues. Okay, so in keeping with what I just said about this, well, let me answer it first. I think it's 1536. Yep. So 1536 is the year that Anne Boleyn is executed, that he marries Jane Seymour. 1535, he had executed Bishop John Fisher, who was a cardinal of the Catholic Church, and also Thomas More, who was one of Henry's closest advisors. This is where the downhill spiral is happening. Anne Boleyn loses her child, which was a boy. Henry goes off the deep end. 1536, what he does is, now that he's broken away from the church in Rome, and I don't say the Catholic Church, because Henry to the end of his life considered himself a loyal Catholic. He considered the Church of England to be Catholic. It just was not under the authority of the Pope. That was what he was breaking away from. But he did see these monasteries and things like it as being sources of great wealth, which he argued were corrupting the Church of England. But also, this was a place where he could grab a lot of property and wealth and land and then turn around and either sell it and profit from it or give it to people that he wanted to reward in some way. And unfortunately, a lot of incredible historic sites were lost during the dissolution of the monasteries, sometimes called the suppression of the monasteries. Ooh, another good one. I believe that the remnants of this still exist, the Mary Rose. Right at the end of his life there. This is in the musical 6 as well. Welcome to the House of Holbein, Hans Holbein. A lot of the artwork, a lot of the portraits we have of people in this time period, including members of Henry VIII's family, come from Hans Holbein. Ooh, he turned 18 that year, but I want to say he was still 17 when he became king. I was a little unsure on that one. Old Copper-Nose. If that's true, I've never heard it before, so I'm going to say false. Dang, really? Okay, that's news to me. I learned something in this. I've never heard that before. In which year did Henry found the Church of England? Okay, this is going to be a tough one because... and I'm going to talk through this a little bit. He marries Anne Boleyn, I think, in early 1533. Did he start the church before that? I'm going to say 1532. Oh, it was the year after he married Anne Boleyn, 1534. All right, I was off on 2 years on that one. I figured he would have started it before because then he approved his own divorce, basically. Catherine Parr. We already talked about this. So, interesting story about Catherine Parr. After Henry dies, She marries Thomas Seymour, who was the brother of Jane Seymour, who had been Henry's wife. And Thomas and Edward Seymour both become close advisors of their nephew, the king, Edward VI. Edward Seymour actually becomes Lord Protector, but eventually both Edward and Thomas will be beheaded, and they're both their names are listed. I think they're both buried at the Tower of London in the Church of St. Peter ad Vincula, St. Peter in Chains. All right, we got 7 to go. All right, let's go in order. Edward VI, Mary I, Elizabeth I. All from different mothers. So Edward is the son of Jane Seymour, his third wife. Mary is the daughter, and only adult child to survive from his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Staunchly Catholic. She's the one that we call Bloody Mary because of her persecution of Protestants. And Elizabeth, who was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Got to be Anne of Cleves. So Anna von Cleve, Anne of Cleves, was German. She was the sister, I believe, of the Duke of Cleves. And this was very much a political match. Really, not many of those in Henry's life. But Henry, having broken away from the church in Rome, needed Protestant allies. And Cleves was part of those German Lutheran states. And so it made sense. And Thomas Cromwell, who was one of Henry VIII's closest advisors, is the one who arranges this. That's where Hans Holbein very famously makes a portrait of Anne of Cleves that Henry, when he meets Anne of Cleves, says she looks nothing like the portrait. And basically it's like a 16th century version of catfishing, he thinks. He's very turned off by Anne of Cleves, talks about her smelling, and there's later references to him saying she looked like a Flanders mare and all this stuff. And but he divorces her, and she goes along with it. And much to her credit, she understands the landscape, lives the rest of her life in England, becomes known as the king's sister. He gives her a palace in Richmond, treats her very well. And when she died, she's the only one of Henry's 6 wives to be buried at Westminster Abbey. If you walk into Westminster Abbey from the back, like where the tomb of the unknown warrior is, and you're looking toward the front, if you go around to the right side and in toward the section where all of the monarchs are, Anne of Cleves is going to be right on the wall on the left side there. She's very close to people like Geoffrey Chaucer and many of the scientists like Isaac Newton and people like that. One of my favorite spots at Westminster Abbey. Henry, though, is not buried there. He's buried with Jane Seymour at Windsor Castle in the Chapel of St. George. There's a big vault where a lot of monarchs are, like George III and folks like that. The most recent queen just passed away, Queen Elizabeth II, and her husband, Prince Philip, along with her parents, King George VI and his wife, Queen Elizabeth, are buried in a smaller crypt off to the side. Henry is in one that contains him, Jane Seymour, Charles I, who was beheaded, who was Henry's nephew a couple of times down the line, as well as an infant child, I believe, of Queen Anne. Hampton Court. So Hampton Court, you can tour today. I haven't been there yet, but I'm looking forward to going. I was originally belonging to Cardinal Wolsey, who was one of Henry's closest advisors. Wolsey had a very dramatic fall from grace when he couldn't arrange the king's great matter, his divorce, without the breakaway from the church. And Henry had a bunch of palaces. I mean, he had a ton of them. Whitehall in London was another popular one. He built one later in his life, around the time he married Catherine Howard, called Nonsuch Palace, which doesn't exist anymore. And a bunch of other ones too. Oh, speaking of, wow, I actually have no idea on this one. I'm going to go with 45. Don't have a clue. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I could probably name 10 of them at most. 50. Okay. Dang. We already talked about this as well. Anne Boleyn was executed in May of 1536. May of 1536. There were a bunch of other guys, including her own brother, who were executed for having been found guilty of having carnal knowledge of Anne. Probably not true. It was just a really convenient way for Thomas Cromwell to get rid of his and the king's enemies by accusing them of that conspiracy with Anne Boleyn. January, I don't remember the exact date, 1547. Yeah, he wasn't that old. He was like, what, 56, 55, 56 years old? Not very old at all. All right, that was fun. I didn't do bad. I'm a little disappointed. I missed a few. I missed the one about the dissolution, or the year that the Church of England was founded. I missed the one about how many palaces he had. And I think I missed one more on top of that. All right, let's continue this with his daughter, Elizabeth. I may not do as well with this one. Okay, here we go. Not quite as confident in this one as I am with Henry VIII. Do my best on this one. Maybe I'll surprise myself. Henry VIII. Starting it out easy. I like it. Help build our confidence a little bit. Definitely false. She was very much Protestant, unlike her sister. Oh, good one. I don't know the exact date, but definitely 1588. With some help from the weather and some really good fire ship tactics. Oh, okay. It's got to be 44. It's definitely 44. I was trying to think of the dates. Oh, this is an epic speech. And we have enough close eyewitness testimony to believe that this speech probably did happen. She said she had the body of a feeble woman, but she had the heart and the stomach of a king, and a king of England, too. While she was in armor, gave that speech. Epic stuff. Her mother was Anne Boleyn. Technically, she had been barred from the throne because of the annulment of the marriage. And I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, was I saying dissolution for the marriages? I don't remember now in the previous video, or in the previous quiz, if I said it was an annulment, is what her father's marriages were. Last monarch of the Tudor dynasty. After her, it went to her cousin, James I of the Stuarts. So, Henry VIII, so obsessed with his legacy and leaving, having a son and passing on the crown, but never had any biological grandchildren, at least not any legitimate grandchildren that we know for sure about. He had at least one illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, that he claimed. But Henry also died young without any children. He may have possibly been the father to one or more of Mary Boleyn. And that was James Stewart. I saw Tudor on the screen. Her sister, Mary. Yep. Thought about executing her too. Almost did. Mary, Queen of Scots, who was the mother of King James, who would inherit the throne after Elizabeth, because Mary, Queen of Scots, at that point in history, was Elizabeth I's heir to the throne. So if Elizabeth had died and Mary was still alive, Mary would have inherited the throne of England. I think a lot of people know this one. The Virgin Queen, because she never married. but was almost certainly not a virgin. Okay, 1557. Oh, it's 1558. I'm always off a year on these things. Was when her sister died, probably of an ovarian tumor. The Act of Settlement? I think that's wrong. Uniformity, yeah. It's amazing that Parliament was passing laws about church and worship, right? Catherine Parr. She got her restored to the line of succession. Catherine Parr did a lot. I mean, give this woman credit. She walked a very fine line. She was probably Protestant. Almost got herself in real trouble for speaking out about that, but learned how to walk it back appropriately in Henry's presence to save her own skin, but also did a lot to restore Henry's relationship with his daughters who had been barred from the succession because of his annulment of the marriages to their mothers. And then she herself died in childbirth with her child from, or after childbirth from Thomas Seymour. We've talked about this one already. It's Edward VI and Mary I. It's got to be Sir Walter Raleigh. Oh, Francis Drake. He's my relative. I'm actually descended from a guy named Sir Francis Drake, but he's not the same one. Okay. I feel terrible I missed that one. Elizabeth is buried with her sister at Westminster Abbey. It's one of my favorite grave sites there. Tombs at the Abbey. Virginia. Of course, she was dead by the time it was founded. Okay, 1558. She was born in like 1533, 34. She's 25. She had to be 25. Oh, this is, that's not Wat Tyler, is it? Thomas Wyatt. I've known that. I just didn't remember it. 1603. Got that one right. Did a little math. She became queen in 1558. I knew it was the early part of the 1600s. 44 years, 1603. She was in her 44th year of her reign. So, just kind of worked that one out. I knew it wasn't 1602. So that was fun. I hope you guys learned something along the way. And let me know how you did. If you learned something, what did you learn? Did you get any right that I got wrong? Rub it in my face. Use the comment section below. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.